and war crimes that have been perpetrated. And despite the fact that 7 years have passed since Palestine joined the International Criminal Court in 2015, and despite the official International Criminal Court prosecutor's announcement to start an investigation in 2021, we have yet to see any developments on the situation of Palestine at the ICC, at the International Criminal Court. Since the new ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, assumed office in June 2021, just a year ago, many groups, including some of the groups that are represented here, have expressed serious concerns that the situation in Palestine has not moved forward 1 inch, 1 centimeter. Nothing has been done. While we've seen the world's reaction to Ukraine and the seriousness with which the world has taken the issue of Ukraine and the seriousness with which the court has taken the issue of Ukraine, Palestine has unfortunately been deprioritized. Now, again, despite this long history of Israeli war crimes, very well documented, there has simply been a limited budget of 50,000 euros, very small, that has been allocated to Palestine, while millions have been allocated to the Ukraine. 42 investigators were deployed by prosecutor Karim Khan, while not a single, on the issue of Ukraine, while not a single investigator has been deployed when it comes to Palestine. The prosecutor has visited Ukraine twice in person. He's tweeted about it on his personal account. Oh, now 3 times, here we go. And tweeted about it on personal accounts. But when it comes to Palestine, all we hear are the birds, because there has been no sound whatsoever. Now, some observers relate that the current attitude by this current prosecutor relate to the pressure that's been exerted upon them by states. And there were rumors that were circulated that former ICC prosecutor Bensouda was threatened in person. Following the 2021 pretrial chamber to proceed with the investigation in Palestine, the then US government worked on sanctioning the prosecutor and judges and suspended their bank accounts, their properties, and canceled their visas. This has led to many people believing that the ICC is not moving forward in the right direction. In fact, it's not moving at all. Now, this webinar will be gathering international lawyers, legal experts, scholars, and NGOs that have been involved in the ICC investigation. And we aim to do the following. The first is to discuss the developments, or lack thereof, with regards to the situation of Palestine at the ICC. The second is to highlight the very alarming pace and deprioritization of the investigation of Palestine. The third is to examine the reasons behind this pace, this very snail's pace, and this deprioritization. And fourth is to discuss possible action plans to push the case forward and to have it reprioritized. Now, I'm very honored that we will be having 4 speakers today, 4 excellent speakers who are experts in their field. Each of these speakers will have about 10 minutes to speak, and I will let you know when we're getting close to the 10 minute by putting it in the chat. And after we have these 4 speakers speak, we will have the opportunity to be able to pose some questions and hopefully have those questions answered by the panel, right? So if you have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat box for now. I will do my best to monitor them, but you may want to wait until all of the presentations are done. So I want to begin now by giving the floor to Raji Sourani, my longtime friend, somebody I have long admired, who is going to address some recent updates when it comes to the ICC. Raji will speak for approximately 10 minutes. Raji is a lawyer. He is the founder and director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, excellent organization. Raji was a member of the International Commission of Jurists and vice president of the International Federation of Human Rights. He's received many, many honors, and as many as he's received will never be enough for all of the work that he's done. The most recent of which is the Right Livelihood Award of 2013, and he received the Knight of France's National Order of Merit in 2020. In 2022, he was appointed as an arbitrator of the International Permanent Court of Arbitration in the Netherlands. Raji, it's such a delight to see you. I wish I could see you in person in Gaza one day, inshallah. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Diana. I will be a bit concerned about the word absence of the Palestinian file or de-prioritizing the Palestinian file at the ICC, because we have to state facts as it is. All of us, we know we are not newcomers to this, and the Palestinian file was addressed first time, I think, since 2006. That was the first time when we initiated contact with the ICC with Mr. Ocampo at the time, and 2008-9 as well, and then before his departure, he put these ugly conditions at the Bellagio, Italy, Harvard host meeting according to Chatham House rules. He said in a clear-cut way in 2011 that he won't move 1 inch in this file without American consent and push. And that was, I mean, the first state of shock we ever received. I mean, that how the word legal conscious at the ICC, I mean, he speaks so bluntly at the time as such. Of course, later on, we have the work 2012 and 2014. PLO was able, I mean, to have non-member state status as one of the conditions for Mr. Ocampo, and was supposed to promptly, I mean, to join, but it didn't join because, and due to political pressure, we were at the General Assembly in New York at the time, and we saw even how European bargained on this. And they told, I mean, PLO leadership at the time, we have one condition, you promise not to go to the ICC, and then we will recognize you as a state. And this wasn't, I mean, accepted at all. Then in 2014, we amounted as Palestinian civil society human rights organizations during the offensive, unprecedented pressure on the PLO leadership. It ended up that they agreed to join, and as a result of that, they signed, ratified Rome Statute, and I'm proud that to say that we played major role in pressuring and convincing Hamas, Jihad Islamic, in joining that and sign and ratify, because that was preconditioned by Abbas. Of course, Bensouda, I consider her very first-class African, real piece of marble, very credible, very strong, and highly professional woman, and she is aware about all the deliberations, discussions with Mr. Ocampo, and she opened, I mean, this investigation, but there was very high political pressure since day one. This was concluded in 2019, and in 2019, December 22nd, she said, yes, I will open the investigation, but I'll refer this case to the pre-trial chamber in order to decide whether Gaza, including East Jerusalem, locates within the area of jurisdiction of the ICC or not, because I don't want in the future any simple legal obstacle to come up and try to sabotage the process. When she did that, I mean, there was a prompt and unprecedented, not by the American government, by President Trump at the time, a presidential decree who said, if any comes close to Israel, I'll imprison and I'll confiscate properties and I'll cancel visas, etc. And that lies on the prosecutor, the judges, and their aides. And this practically had happened, I mean, with Pinzauti in person. And this was big shame because internationally, I mean, there was no single reaction for that. The most mighty state on earth do behave through the president in such ugly, unprecedented way against the most important court on earth. That was very unique and special. Anyway, when this failed by having Trump not being re-elected and Biden was elected, Biden revoked the decree, but not completely. He revoked it vis-a-vis the threat and the direct threat to the judges and prosecutors, but he said that we will keep our friend and ally Israel immune, and we will not allow anybody, I mean, to come close and hold it accountable at the court. These backgrounds are very important because this is not, I mean, something like happening today or yesterday. No, this is deep, long, prolonged, ugly history by US, by Europe, and many other actors who pressured and tried to politicize the ICC, as you are aware and as you know. And in February 5th, the pre-trial chamber was able to decide, yes, Gaza, including East Jerusalem, it's part of the ICC jurisdiction, and Rome Statute applied there. Then we anticipated in any minute, in any hour, any day, that Pinzauti comes and declare opening the investigation, but she didn't. And what had happened during these 2 months, 2 diplomats, including very high-ranking Israeli diplomat, walked inside her office, and they threatened her physically, I mean, with her life. And that's also, I mean, unprecedented. And we have to know what this lady really faced and what this system faced at the time. Now, this worked on, she informed the Dutch government, she informed the Benelux country, 39 countries, but no reaction was whatsoever. Now, it's not only that, but after that, she decided, with all the risk she has on her shoulders, to go and publicly on March 3rd that she will open the investigation. And soon after that, in April, she appointed the investigative committee on Palestine question and situation. Now, Palestine situation, the committee was there. We welcomed that, and it was a real big victory, quite a lot of hope, and we felt at the end of the day, the train departed the station, and justice, you know, on the way. But what had happened, I mean, there was at the time the election of the new ICC prosecutor, and our friend who's part of our legal team, Fergal from Ireland, Fergal Genor, he was almost elected in 3 rounds, and he was there. Last minute, I mean, something happened. And again, I'm talking about politicization of the ICC and how much pressure. And Mr. KK was up there, supported, especially, I mean, by the Brits, by the Germans, precisely, and sort of compromise, I mean, happened, and he was elected. Now, we have no political, and we shouldn't have political evaluation for the ICC prosecutor. We knew him, me and Shawam, precisely, I mean, for the last 20 years or so. And he tried to work, I mean, on this, but for many reasons, I mean, he wasn't part of the team. Anyway, he was there, and we began to monitor what's really going on. So it was at the time, the corona and the pandemic and, you know, some circumstances around. So that's why we decided in last October to, in 2021, to be at The Hague. And at The Hague, I mean, to raise the issue, to demonstrate our presence, and to meet with all needed body. He gave us twice fixed meetings, and last minute he canceled, I mean, these 2 meetings for no reason, though he knows that we are not hunky-bunky lawyers. We are the ones who are representing the victims in West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza. We are the ones who are doing, I mean, the real hard work for years and years. And he's aware about the respected organizations, I mean, behind that. And he's aware about the super fantastic legal team, whether the Palestinian or international people who are working on that. But twice he declined last minute from seeing us. We met the VPRS and we discussed thoroughly everything with them. We met the investigative committee. We met with the other bodies, you know, at the ICC. But the most important thing that the investigative body said in a clear, simple way, I do quote the head of this investigation team, Mary. She said, we are lucky having people, I mean, like you in this case, and the legal submissions which has been represented by the Palestinian team, super fantastic, and it's real piece of legal art. And even we took care of the footnotes of it. It's very rich, it's very educational, and it will be very helpful for the work. I mean, we are doing, and we are sitting on it, studying it, and very soon we will come back to you. But since October 2021, till we came back, I mean, recent, I mean, to The Hague, we were every day trying, I mean, to be in touch with them, but there was no response, no reaction, no contact, which was very unique, mysterious, and ununderstandable. And that's why we decided, I mean, recently, I mean, to go and be there once again in May. And I think the reason for this legal demonstrative meeting was simple and clear. First, update our knowledge and information and exchange information between academics, jurists, lawyers, experts, whether in the Palestinian legal team or friends of them in Europe and US. Second, there was a meeting for the legal team strategy, what to do next. And three, there was the Ukrainian war, and we were very well furnished with the facts and what's going on. And as you said rightly, Diana, I mean, there was no budget, I mean, for Ukraine. And the ICC prosecutor, he said, you know, I don't have it on the budget. And usually ICC, Assembly of State Party, who decide on budget. So that's why he seek states to contribute. And they contributed with hundreds of millions of dollars. And second, he said, I don't have staff and I need staff to investigate. Netherlands only gave him 30 investigators and other states gave him 12. And these were within less than 2 weeks allocated, you know, Ukraine itself, and they began to help in the investigation on the ground. Mr. KK in person, he visited till last week for the third time Ukraine, and that was shocking because even he then tried with the Israelis, you know, asking them to visit, though we told him that they will never allow you to come, but he didn't try. Finally, I want to say that it's not only money, it's not only experts, it's not only you know, the visits and tweets he made and the interviews, but he demonstrates very genuine will, I mean, to go on and further with that. And he spoke about Ukraine as crime theater, the entire Ukraine. Now, as a Palestinian and as a Palestinian lawyer and jurist and somebody interested in human rights, I'm not against that at all. Not against one single thing that happened to Ukraine. We are talking about invasion, we are talking about occupation, and Boris Johnson absolutely right, and what he said legitimate. There is invasion, there is occupation. Ukrainian people has the right of resistance, have the right of self-determination. They have the right of even armed struggle against the Russians. And he asked his own people, the Brits, to go and join as a free people, the Ukrainians in resisting the Russian occupation. And he promised not only to support with money, but with arms as well. And the most, I think, effective arms, the Ukrainian army and the resistance there. It's not only that. I'm just giving one example. There was, because of the invasion and the occupation, series of unprecedented sanctions on Russia, 7 layers of sanctions. Never ever this had happened. And I felt I'm very proud with that. That's super fantastic. I mean, how the West react on invasion and occupation. But all what we are talking about, invasion and occupation, 4 months only. That's all what we are talking about. In Palestine, the short version, we have 55 years, and the long version, 74 years. So how the world reacted? I mean, we see how there is politicization, selectivity in the way Mr. KK and the prosecution office doing. We met and we insisted to meet with him. He claimed once again that he's outside the country, he's traveling, and he has a very busy schedule. We met with Nuzhat Khan. She's first-class lawyer, and she's from Fiji, and she was the ex-president of the Human Rights Council, and she has very good background, and we were happy that she was elected. When we raised tête-à-tête with her these issues, and very directly, and very aggressively, very honest. I mean, why this is happening? I mean, you know, and how can this happen? We want to see, and we are happy that this is happening in Ukraine, but why not happening in Palestine? Why this is not happening in Afghanistan? Why this is not happening in Colombia, in Kenya, and other parts of the world? Same thing, I mean, the one in charge of the investigation team, his name, Abdou Si, he's Senegalese, he's super fantastic professional lawyer as well, and he has been working for the last 15 years in hard cases at the court, and they told us even the team expanded. It's not only 4, they are already now 13. We wondered, I mean, why you haven't been in contact with us? Why you didn't seek information? Why, I mean, if you want to do anything in Palestinian issue, Israel not allowing you to come in, and they will not allow you. Egypt, I mean, didn't allow you to come in so far. So how you will have that information? The good thing that they both said, we have no disagreement with all what you raised, not as Raji Sourani, but I'm talking about the Palestinian legal team. In everything we raised, they said we 100% agree, and we promise you we were just reconstructing, I mean, the ICC, especially, I mean, the Palestinian team, and soon we will begin with that. But we conveyed simple message. We are not going to be good victim for anybody, neither for the Israelis nor for Mr. Karim Khan. And we seek justice and dignity, and that's not too much. I mean, what we are seeking, and we want, I mean, to see things moving, in the ICC vis-a-vis the Palestine situation. So, can that happen? Do we hope that happen? In case this doesn't happen, as we open the gates of hell on Mr. Ocampo, I mean, long time ago, when he acted according to instructions, I think Mr. KK won't be exception on that. Our mission, simple. We represent victims. We need justice and dignity for them. If things doesn't move, we won't be silent. And I think October, November, the coming October and November will be the period of test, whether things move in this file or not. But I can assure everybody, I mean, present, and some of you are involved in this, and they know very well our spirit, our intention, our commitment, that we won't be good victims, neither for His Excellency Mr. KK or the American pressure, and we will shame and name whether the British Foreign Minister, who is selectively, I mean, dealing with that, or other European leaders. This is not hunky-bunky game. It's the last resort, and the message they are conveying, to the world, especially to this part of the world, there is justice for rich. There is no justice for poor. And the old good example of old Rome, when there was law for masters and no law for slaves, we are not going to be accepting that we are the slaves of the 24th century. We cannot be protected. Palestinians didn't invent international law, international humanitarian law, or Geneva Conventions. We didn't invent Rome Statute. We didn't invent all IHL, but we as human beings sharing these values with others, and we will do and invest our best in order to have justice and dignity for those who are represented through us. So I'm not saying, I mean, what's happening ideal. It's very dangerous, very horrifying, quite a lot of politics involved in what's going on in that. And the West, especially, I mean, the West, try to be very selective and try to politicize, I mean, ICC. We will not allow to do that. World civil society is not, soft flesh.
Yeah.
World human rights organizations are not soft flesh. And our plan, and we are building it right now together with our allies in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, and with our international legal team towards, coming October, November, to exert real pressure on those who try to politicize that. One last word I want to say, I'm not a big fan of the PA or its politics, but in this regard, I can assure you, yet we don't have any contradiction with them. I mean, in this specific file, it's vice versa. This is going, I mean, parallel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Raji. Thank you very much. Before I turn to our second speaker, I neglected to introduce myself, which isn't very kind. My name is Diana Buttu. أنا اسمي ديانا بوتو. أهلا وسهلا فيكم. الندوة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية، ولكن في ترجمة باللغة العربية. أعتقد مش عارفة كيف بالضبط. إحسان إذا بدك تدلنا كيف بالضبط لازم يكون ترجمة. تفضل.
تمام. هو في شكرا ديانا، أو شكرا أبو باسل على المداخلة العظيمة. في أيقونة في شاشة الزوم تحت على شكل الجلوبال، الكرة الأرضية، فبس الشخص بيضغط عليها وبيختار اللغة العربية.
شكرا كثير. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. So I will switch back to English. I first want to say thank you to Raji for an excellent presentation and for giving us the history of how it is that we got to this point. For those who may not have picked up, KK is Karim Khan, who is the current prosecutor. And I like the idea of KK. It's a nice short name. I want to then turn to our second speaker, Triestino Mariniello, who will talk about, and I'm sure I said your last name incorrectly. No, I studied Italian for a little bit, not very long. Who will talk about the position of the legal team towards the latest developments, and highlight the perhaps concerning, perhaps not concerning, pace and the deprioritization of the investigation. Specifically, what does this mean to victims that you are representing? And are there any expected scenarios? So in terms of his bio, he is a member of the legal team representing Gaza victims before the International Criminal Court. Triestino is a senior lecturer in law at Liverpool John Moores University and a senior research fellow of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation at the Humboldt University of Berlin. He's published widely on international criminal law and international mechanisms and on the International Criminal Court in particular. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Diana. Many thanks to Hisan Law for Palestine for this invitation and the possibility to meet some friends and colleagues, well, even if just virtually. I will, it's never easy to speak after Raji and all the emotional waves he gives every time. I mean, he talks about, his work and more in general, the work of civil society, Palestinian civil society particularly, but not only, before the International Criminal Court. So I will I will try. I will start from actually what Raji was saying before, that technically this is not a de-prioritization of the prosecutor. The prosecutor has deprioritized the investigation in the Afghanistan situation when it comes to the alleged crimes committed by the US nationals and the members of the Afghanistan security system, but it does not, at least so far formally, the Office of the Prosecutor has not decided to hibernate, to freeze the investigation in, formally speaking, in relation to the situation in Palestine. We have recently discussed a lot in a public event in The Hague about our concerns, when say ours, I mean of the legal representative of victims, when it comes to the what we have called the paralysis of the International Criminal Court. So, in other words, paralysis here means the reluctance of the new prosecutor to select cases. Victims welcomed with huge enthusiasm the decision of the former prosecutor to open an investigation. Well, to be more precise, to request to the competent pre-trial chamber to submit a request to open an investigation. This decision was welcomed with huge enthusiasm, as I said, by Palestinian victims, because Palestinian victims of war crimes and crimes against humanity do not have any alternatives. There is no possibility of domestic justice justice at the national level. There is no accountability at the national level for very simple reasons, because Israeli military courts are unwilling and most likely even unable to address the most serious violation of international law, international human rights law, international humanitarian law that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Not because I say it, because this is my personal idea of speculation, but this has been widely addressed and documented by international organizations, including, for instance, the International Federation of Human Rights, just to mention one, Human Rights Watch, by Palestinian organizations, including PCHR and B'Tselem, which recently have published a very interesting, and I invite everyone here today to read the report published by PCHR and B'Tselem on how the Israeli military justice system actually whitewashes crimes committed, well, the most serious crimes committed by Israeli military and political officers, but specifically in relation to the Great March of Return. But the unwillingness of the Israeli military justice system to provide the victims with justice has been also documented by the United Nations bodies. In particular, if you look at all the reports published by the UN Commission of Inquiries since the famous Goldstone report, so I'm referring to the military invasion of Gaza 2007-2008, so Cast-led, United Nations Commission of Inquiry have systematically documented how the Israeli military justice system does not have the objective to provide victims with justice, but the only aim is to shield alleged perpetrators of war crimes and crimes against humanity from justice. So these structural deficiencies, as they've been labeled by the United Nations, are, well, structural deficiencies of the Israeli military justice systems have been widely documented. This should be taken into account also, for instance, when it comes to the most recent facts. We have heard a lot, in particular from the Biden administration, a lot of statements saying that Israel has the capacity to address an alleged war crimes committed in relation to the case of Shirin Abu Akleh. So they say that this should be addressed by domestic authorities in Israel. Well, the US administration knows very clearly that this will never happen, that as far as justice will be confined to a domestic level, there will be no justice. So as Raji was mentioning before, the International Criminal Court is the only possibility to provide victims of the most serious crimes of justice. And of course, this cannot happen at domestic level before Palestinian courts. Palestine, on the other side, is unable to prosecute any Israeli military or political officer, so allegedly responsible of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Does this mean that the investigation, as defined by the former prosecutor, is perfect or does not present any problems? No, not really. Again, as legal representative of victims in 2010, we expressed our concerns before the trial chamber that the scope of the investigation is extremely narrow. Why? Because it excludes a lot of Palestinian victims of war crimes and crimes against humanity from the investigation itself, and so from any possibility to get justice. First of all, the scope of the investigation is narrow when it comes to the Gaza war in 2014. The Office of the Prosecutor has documented more than 3,000 incidents that amount to war crimes. Why the investigation focuses only on 3 of these incidents is unclear. The Office of the Prosecutor never really clarified why only 3 incidents have been selected. The scope of the investigation is narrow because it does not include the crimes against humanity. This is extremely important because if you read the documents produced so far by the Office of the Prosecutor, sometimes you get the impression that this is a conflict in which 2 parties are more or less equally involved on the same level. Nothing, as we will know here, is more false than this. First of all, this is not a conflict between these 2 parties. This is the most prolonged military occupation of modern times. There is another ongoing occupation in the Gaza Strip for more than 15 years now. So what is missing in the investigation so far is the context itself, is the occupation, and the occupation itself is a crime against humanity, because occupation here means systematic and widespread attack against civilians. Just to be clear, both in the West Bank, including this Jerusalem, and in the Gaza Strip. So if we don't include, if the Office of the Prosecutor does not include the crimes against humanity, this investigation, the context itself will always be missing. This is according to my personal views, of course, but of course, excluding crimes against humanity means also excluding crimes that now are widely documented by international organizations. I'm referring in particular to Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International that have clearly said that Israeli nationals are responsible, authorities are responsible for the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. But this has already been documented by an Israeli organization, B'Tselem, a few months before, but was clearly said by Palestinian organizations more than 10 years ago. So for a matter of time, I'm going to conclude just to say that the Office of the Prosecutor, and these are the victims, the main victims' concerns, I would say, and also of the of civil society here, is first of all that the Office of the Prosecutor has to select the cases as soon as possible. As we always say, justice delayed is justice denied, no? So the Palestinian situation before the ICC did not start last year. It started in 2009. So the first time that the state of Palestine started its formal engagement with the ICC. So it's more than 13 years that Palestinian victims of the most serious crimes have been waiting for justice. It's not clear, it's really difficult from the interest of justice, from a legal perspective, to be honest, it's very difficult to understand why the prosecutor, after the opening of the investigation last year, has not selected the cases yet. Well, just to be clear, selecting cases means identifying the responsible of these crimes and their criminal conduct, and requesting an arrest warrant and or a summons to appear, depending on whether the conditions of the arrest warrant are satisfied. And second, equally important, I would say, widening the scope of the investigation. Widening the scope of the investigation means also including the crimes, war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in May 2021 by the Israeli authorities in Gaza. This has been widely documented by Palestinian organizations here. I refer again to PCHR, Halak, and Al-Mezan, which have made a submission recently before the Office of the Prosecutor documenting the commission of these crimes. Any other delay in opening the investigation and widening the investigation would not only be a problem for Palestinian victims, Palestinian civil society, but will be first of all a problem for the court itself, which will show once again after Afghanistan and after Iraq that it's unwilling and maybe unable to address the crimes of the powerful. And we'll be very happy to get any questions. Many thanks, and sorry if it took more than what I was supposed to. Thank you.
No, you actually ended under time, which is wonderful. Thank you, Professor Mariniello. I appreciate your contributions, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions regarding the issue of the actual legality of the occupation as a whole, and what can be done with that. I want to now turn to Giulia Pinzotti, who is our third speaker, and I really welcome you here as well, who's going to talk about the obstacles that are hindering the Palestine case from moving forward at the ICC, and the prosecutor's authority to deprioritize the case. Is that the case? What can be done to push the case forward and to have it reprioritized, especially at the level of academics and the civil society community that is involved in international criminal law? Now, I know that there's a lot of people who are focused now on Ukraine, but how is it that we can push this even further? In terms of her bio, she's an assistant professor at Leiden University who has co-authored the Amicus submission on Palestine to the ICC. She has a broad experience in the law and practice of international courts and tribunals, and Giulia has worked with the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the mechanism for the International Criminal Tribunals, and the pretrial judge and appeals chamber at the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. Giulia, the floor is yours, and welcome.
Thank you, Diana, for the introduction, and thank you to Law for Palestine for organizing this webinar. Before I address the 3 points that Diana mentioned, I just want to echo what Raji and Tristino were saying about Palestine's case situation being deprioritized. I'm also going to argue that that is not the label, the right label for what's happening to Palestine, because in an OTP policy document, deprioritized means that investigations are completely suspended, that the investigation is hibernated and nothing at all is happening. And this is different from prioritization. That is, investigation of selected cases are rolled out over time on a spectrum of priorities. There are those that are really top priority and are moving forward more quickly, and there are others that have lesser priority and proceed more slowly, but they're still moving forward. So I don't think that we should use the deprioritized label for the Palestine situation in this sense. It seems that the OTP is moving forward, even though not at the pace that we would like them to. And I know I'm sounding like I'm a spokesperson for the Office of the Prosecutor at the ICC, and that really is not my intention or my role today. Now, turning to the 3 questions that I was asked to address, I'll start with the prosecutor's authority to prioritize certain cases. The short answer is that under the Rome Statute, the prosecutor has a very broad discretion when it comes to decisions to initiate an investigation, prioritize situations in which they're going to actively investigate, select specific cases, and then select the charges. The prosecutor's discretion is not completely unfettered, but there is no form of judicial review or even other review over the prosecutor's conduct of the investigation, including the decision to hibernate an investigation. And this is perhaps a lacuna in the Rome statute. Now, I want to elaborate a little bit on the prosecutorial discretion with regards to Palestine situation specifically, because as we all know, Palestine made a self-referral in 2014. And because this is a self-referral, the good news is that the prosecutor's discretion is a little bit more limited than it would otherwise be if this was a case of proprio motu investigation. There are, however, another 16 investigations happening in parallel to the Palestine investigation. And we know from the independent expert review that was carried out in 2020 that the investigation division in the Office of the Prosecutor has capacity for 8 simultaneous investigations. Whether this is correct or not, I don't know. I think that the prosecution might be slightly different, like 4 cases and then 4 investigations. But what it means is that the office doesn't have the means to pour the same amount of resources into 17 investigations. The Rome Statute gives it a broad discretion to choose what to prioritize. So how does it do that? There's no criteria in the Rome Statute besides the fact that the prosecutor has broad discretion subject to its obligation to act independently, impartially, and objectively. But there are 2 OTP internal documents, policy documents that I think are relevant to our discussion. And these are the 2016 policy paper on case selection and prioritization and the 2021 policy paper on situation completion. According to the policy paper on case selection and prioritization, the main criteria for case selection are gravity. Well, the main criterion really is gravity. And then other criteria are the degree of responsibility of the alleged perpetrators and the potential charges. When it comes to deciding what cases to prioritize for investigation, we're told that the office does a comparative review of the criteria that are applicable to case selection, plus considering the impact of the investigations and prosecutions and operational considerations, that is availability of evidence, the prospects of cooperation, the security situation in the country, and the prospects that any arrest warrants or summons will be executed. So to the extent that the Palestinian investigation is moving forward, this is unfortunately within the scope of the prosecutor's discretion, I would say. If the case was actually hibernated, like completely frozen immediately after the opening of the investigation, then this would be truly terrible and arguably an abuse of prosecutorial discretion, I would say. But hopefully that's not the case. In any event, because this was a referral by the state of Palestine, the prosecutor cannot simply close the investigation without carrying out any prosecutions, because there are safeguards in the Rome Statute. Under Article 53(2), the prosecutor must inform the referring body, so in this case, Palestine, and the pretrial chamber if it finds that there isn't sufficient basis for a prosecution. So this could then trigger litigation at least, and it is a form of judicial control. So to conclude on this point, I think that this investigation will be a long and perhaps a difficult process, but I'm confident or at least hopeful that there will be prosecutions at some point. And if I'm wrong, then at least there is some form of judicial control over prosecutorial discretion if they decide to close the investigation without carrying out any prosecutions. Now, given this framework, what are the obstacles that are preventing the Palestine investigation from moving forward, or rather from being perhaps a top priority in the way that other situations like the one in Ukraine seem to be? Definitely, I would say resources are a problem. And also, if I think about all the factors that I mentioned, I would say that lack of cooperation is a factor that distinguishes the Palestine situation from the situation in Ukraine. And this isn't, I think, so relevant for the conduct of the investigation itself, because evidence can be accessed even without having access to the territory, but it's rather from the point of view of the prospects that arrest warrants or summons will be executed. And I would say, in this sense, maybe a better comparison, if you wanted to have one, would be the situation in Georgia, where it took the office about 6 years, if my calculation is right, to go from the opening of the investigation to the application for the issuance of arrest warrants, because the authorization to investigate was granted in 2016, and it's only a few months ago, in March 2022, that the prosecutor announced the application for arrest warrants. So it took quite some time to the office, and this is a situation in which cooperation wasn't exactly forthcoming. Then another important factor, and now I'm venturing into extra legal considerations, in my view, is the risk of backlash by member states that are opposed to the Palestine investigation. And we know that there is a considerable number of states that are opposed to the investigation. We know this from the proceedings and all of the Amici Curiae submissions. And these include some powerful states. And we also know that the state of nationality of the prosecutor himself is not very favorable of this investigation. And the situation in Ukraine in this regard is completely different, where 42 states have made a referral to the court and have pledged resources, as Raji was saying. Now, what can be done to sort of push the investigation forward, or to make it move forward faster, especially at the level of civil society? I think, unfortunately, not much, because of the nature of prosecutorial discretion, it's mainly the prosecutor and the judges, to a much more limited extent, that have the authority to decide where, when, and whom to investigate and prosecute. And what civil society can do is what Raji and other Palestinian organizations have been doing, which is to try and engage with the office of the prosecutor, to share information, share evidence, and make absolutely clear that they're there, they're willing to help. Something else that perhaps could help move the investigation forward more quickly, in my view, is rather diplomatic action within the assembly of state parties. So garnering support for the investigation, I think, would be important. I don't think the states can necessarily pledge resources that can be allocated to a specific situation. I think it's then the office itself that decides how to allocate those resources, but those states that, there are states, as Raji was mentioning, that have seconded some investigators to the court for the situation in Ukraine. Can the same thing be done for the situation in Palestine? But there, the obstacles, if any, are political rather than legal, and diplomatic action, I would say, is what's needed. So to wrap up, anything that happens within the framework of an investigation is left to the prosecutor's discretion. This is, in a sense, perhaps bad news, but it's also good news there is an independent prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, and judicial control is very limited at this stage. You know, it goes without saying that international criminal justice is very selective. And because it is so selective, I think that the prosecutor and the judges must decide where, when, whom they investigate and prosecute. And they must think very carefully about what they do, because they, in so doing, they send a message. And I think that there are compelling reasons in the Palestine situation to prioritize investigation activities, because any delay can open the court to accusations of political interference, send confusing messages to victims and witnesses, and basically erode trust in the court. So I think they need to think very carefully about their next move. And I'm going to leave it at that and look forward to the questions.
Thank you very, very much. That was a really thought-provoking presentation, Giulia, and I will be posing a number of questions to you when we have a chance. Again, thank you for that. I want to turn now to our final, last but definitely not least, speaker, who is Professor John Quigley. John Quigley is a legal scholar. He's a professor emeritus at Ohio State University and an international lawyer with a very long history of involvement in human rights litigation, and in particular has been a mentor when it comes to Palestine. His numerous publications include books and articles on human rights, on the United Nations, on war and peace, and on Palestine. Professor Quigley has been asked to discuss the deprioritization of Palestine, although I've now heard that that's probably not the best term. And how does this deprioritization affect the work of the court? How does it affect its reputation as a whole? So picking up, Giulia, off of your last statement, and as well as international criminal law. So Professor Quigley, it's really an honor to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Diana. It's a great pleasure to be here with old and new friends in this group. I was very interested to hear Raji's recitation of the horrors that he and Shawan have gone through. I was only marginally involved in those horrors. I was part of a charade that was put on at The Hague in 2010 by the prosecutor when he supposedly was trying to decide whether Palestine was a state. And I had sent him some messages informing him that Palestine is a state. And he asked me whether I would come and argue the issue in an informal session in his office at The Hague. And he was planning to invite 4 people to argue that Palestine was a state and 4 people to argue that Palestine is not a state. So I went as one of the 4 people arguing that Palestine is a state. On the other side was Dory Gold from Israel. Yes, Diana. And also Malcolm Shaw. And they really had nothing rational to say. The prosecutor, after that session, let me know that they were planning to publish what had been said at the session, but they ultimately decided not to publish it. And I think the reason they decided not to publish it was that it was so obvious that Dory Gold and Malcolm Shaw had nothing rational to say. But so in any event, that was part of the charade that, of course, the prosecutor ultimately decided that it was not his role to decide whether Palestine is a state. But in any event, I want to move on to more current issues because these have been raised here. And I thought what Giulia said was very important about case selection and the criteria for case selection. And I think it may be possible to put Palestine a bit higher on the ladder in that regard. For one thing, the issue of the settlements. The issue of the settlements doesn't require a great deal of fact investigation. I mean, if the prosecutor asks me whom to prosecute for the settlements, you know, I can only tell him to look at the membership of the Cabinet of Israel. I mean, this would take, you know, 2 minutes. And the issue of the settlements and their legality is quite clear. So that there's really nothing to investigate. The other issue that I think can usefully be put forward is that of denial of repatriation. And this is especially important, I think, for the victims from Gaza, because the really basic violation of their rights is that they are not permitted to live in their own country. And this is a crime, the denial. It comes under persecution and apartheid in the Article 7 of the Rome Statute. So again, there's very little to investigate. It's quite clear that the population of Gaza, that is those who are from 1948, that they are not permitted to return. Maybe there is some family reunification that Israel could say, well, you know, we allow that. But I mean, I think it could be investigated very quickly to conclude that that again, any member of the Cabinet of Israel would be a potential person to investigate for denying repatriation. And so all of these arguments, what Giulia was talking about, the difficulties that have been found with regard to other situations in terms of and how long it's taken, I think none of that applies. Now, I don't mean that it's not important to investigate the war crimes that were committed in 2014 and 2021, but you can only put these people in jail once. And you know, it doesn't seem to matter too much whether it's for what was done in Gaza in 2014 or for the denial of repatriation or for the settlements. I mean, you may have even more political backlash to an investigation for the settlements or for denial of repatriation, because those are more kind of generic issues about Israel, and it raises the issue, you know, of what Israel is as a state. But in any event, from the practical standpoint, it seems to me that these should be put front and center. With regard to denial of repatriation, I note that the 2018 referral of Palestine that Mr. Malki filed includes apartheid and includes crimes against humanity. So I'm wondering whether denial of repatriation can be considered to be part of what has been referred to the court already. It would probably be helpful to have a new Article 14 referral from Palestine, and I and others have been raising that issue, you know, with the lawyers that are working on this from the side of the Palestine government. That would certainly be helpful, but perhaps not absolutely essential. I'm just not certain about that. What Giulia was saying about the large number of referrals on Ukraine is interesting too. I mean, can we get other countries that are party to the Rome Statute make referral on Palestine, on any of these issues? I'm asking out of ignorance here. I don't know whether anyone has looked into this. Unfortunately, not very many of the Arab states are party to the Rome Statute, but whether it would be possible to put together a group of new referrals, I think that might be helpful in countering the opposition that's coming from Germany, from the UK, from the United States to pursuit of prosecutions in relation to Palestine. I think perhaps I'll stop there. I think others are more involved in this than I am and have more to add. But those are the issues that I wanted to raise. Diana asked at the outset whether I would be talking about the reputation of the court for not going into this. I think that's fairly obvious that the court's reputation is at stake if it gives in to what the powerful states are telling it to do. And we've heard from Raji that this was fairly open with the previous the original prosecutor in the court. But I think I'll stop there, Diana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Quigley. That was very generous of you. And I share your opinion that it doesn't require much when it comes to some of these cases, in particular settlements. We know who builds them. We know who is authorizing them. We know who's planning them, and so on. I think it goes back to something that was said earlier, that they're focusing on war crimes rather than rather than on the other crimes as well. I want to turn now to questions in case anybody has any questions. We can pose our questions a couple of ways. You can either pose the question in the chat box if you'd like, or you can raise your hand and you can pose your question directly. So it's up to you. We already have one question, and I'm going to read that out, Ghadir, if you don't mind. So Ghadir's question is for Giulia, and she asks, if some cases or countries, get attention because they have resources and political support from member states to the Rome Statute that can refer the case to the prosecutor of the ICC, how can we guarantee that Palestine and other countries will be served justice? Can we say that politics have an upper hand on the implementation of international law? So Giulia, that's a question for you.
Would you like me to answer the question now, or are we?
Please, that would be wonderful. No, let's go ahead until we get more questions.
Well, thanks for the question, Ghadir. One just small clarification is that I thought I mentioned it in my presentation, but maybe not clearly enough. When member states pledge resources for the investigation in Ukraine, they can't actually do that. They can't earmark resources for the purposes of a specific situation. So it's not a question of, how much money states throw at a particular investigation. But definitely we've seen in Ukraine an overwhelming support, political support for the ongoing investigation. And I would agree with what John just said, that political support seems to help. And so it would be important at least to counter the opposition that we know exists from a significant number of states, including some powerful states. So certainly it wouldn't hurt, and I would think that it would help. Whether politics as the upper end in the implementation of international law, I'm hesitating between responding in a sort of a hopeful way, no, international law will prevail, and a rather more cynical answer that actually, unfortunately, as far as international law is concerned, that's probably the way it is. And if I may
go ahead, please, Giulia.
If I may just a quick reaction to what John was saying with regards to the comparison between Palestine and Georgia, I agree with you that the situations are completely different. And I'm not suggesting that 6 years for the issuance of arrest warrants is an appropriate length of time. Absolutely. I mean, I would be mad if it takes 6 years, but I think first, we should be careful in comparing different situations, although it's the temptation is there. But even in Ukraine, with the 42 investigators, as Raji was saying, I don't think that these are OTP staff members. So I'd be curious to know how many OTP staff members have been allocated to this investigation and how fast this investigation is actually proceedings and how long it will take to move forward. If by that we mean seeing some arrest warrants, I don't know. I reserve my judgment for the time being.
Thank you very much, Giulia. I have a question by Dr. Moataz, if you wanted to pose your question.
Thank you. All these presentations are really great. Just a comment, regarding the nature of the international criminal justice. If we look at the history of the international criminal justice since the Vienna Congress in 1815 until now, it has been always meant to be like for political purposes and in order to pressure like senior leaders around the world, and this is what exactly the criminal court is doing. If we look at the history of the court since 2002, there are only three conflicts until now in the court. Most of the defendants, about 47 of them are Africans. So probably this is, I'm just wondering, is the court really a place for criminal justice, or it is more for power balance? And my specific question is for Raji. You mentioned October and November this year. Like, are there like specific things that on the plan in this regard? I have also another question related to the leaks that we heard like 1 year ago that from some British newspapers and some Israeli newspapers saying that the Palestinian Authority, and Raji, you said you are, as civil society, we are in full agreement with the Palestinian Authority. But there are some reports, unconfirmed reports, denied by the Palestinian officials, that the Palestinian Authority requested the court or the prosecutor to slow down, or maybe in other words, to deprioritize the proceedings before the court. So I'm wondering that, would that like contributed to the state of affairs that we are having now? Thank you.
So thank you very much. Raji, did you want to answer both the question of this is a court against Africa and about the Palestinian Authority?
Yes, please, Diana. John, it's so nice to hear from you. I mean, you always have been a source of inspiration, and you are one of our gurus in human rights. You are real good example. I mean, we follow in doing this. But again, to the question. Last week, I know that there was a meeting between the Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Malki and the ICC prosecutor. And he delayed that meeting almost 5 months. He was just the prosecutor delaying it day after day, which is very odd, very strange, and totally unacceptable. And it was very stormy meeting. And the concept of the meeting was two things. That he didn't accept the protest letter has been sent to him by the Palestinian Foreign Ministry in this regard. They telling him, justice delayed, justice denied, and you have to go quicker, I mean, in your procedure, and there is no reason whatsoever, I mean, to keep that. And the second, he told him that they are inciting Palestinian civil society, human rights organizations in order to attack Mr. KK. I mean, that's absurd, totally absurd. I mean, from my perspective, how ICC prosecutor is speaking this concept, is speaking that way, which is totally, I mean, unbalanced. Instead of explaining, you know, regretting what he's doing and trying to fix things. No, I mean, he's doing things. I mean, he didn't say a word when Mr. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of UK, said publicly in a letter addressing two parliamentarians, and he told them, we are very proud as Brits that we have the President of the Court British. We are very proud that we have the Registrar of the Court British. We are very proud we have the Prosecutor British, and UK is very founding member of the ICC, and we are very proud of that. But we will never ever allow our friend Israel to be held accountable at the ICC. This is a big shame. This is the politicization I'm talking about. This is what is not acceptable to us. And this is the real direct interference by the independence of judiciary. Neither the Prime Minister of UK or any other body do have the right, I mean, to address, you know, the court and the court prosecutor, I mean, that way. We want independent, credible, professional ICC prosecutor and body. How that justice, I mean, works, justice blind, irrelevant of sex, religion, race, nationality, etc. And we want to see that. The second thing, I think it's very important to make very strong emphasis on specific thing. Palestine really in need of the ICC. We need it badly. We need dignity. We deserve dignity and justice for our victims. And we will not give up. And we are not going to be good victims. And we will fight for that. We will invest our best, I mean, in this regard. And nobody will take the hope from our hearts or minds. We will fight for it. We know how to do first-class lawyering on behalf of our victims who we are representing. We look to their eyes, to their families' eyes. We see them every day, and we have no right to forget or to forgive. Accountability, it's a must. We will fight for that, and we will try our best. But I want to say as well, as Palestinians in need of the ICC, ICC in need for Palestine to restore its credibility, its independence, to show that they are really the real world conscious for victims. It's no man's court. When you don't find justice anywhere, you resort to that. Especially, we are talking about the most well-documented conflict in the modern history. I think all political different bodies, states, and even, I mean, this prosecutor tried to send waves and waves of pessimism, of giving up, of losing hope. I want to tell you how we think and how we feel. We are in the right side of history. And it's our right to use effectively rule of law. This is the creme de la creme of the human experience. This what is giving us moral legal superiority on a criminal and that's the Israeli occupation and the Israeli state and Zionism, who are doing these war crimes day after day at the daylight, and it's broadcasted all over the world, but the world unable to hold them accountable. So this moral legal superiority on these criminals, we will not allow anybody, to take it from our hearts or our minds. And we are on the right side of history. We will fight for this just, fair cause, whatever it costs. Now, in October, November, coming October, November, if the ICC prosecutor, and I'm having very big if, and this is something, I'm telling you very clearly and very bluntly, if ICC prosecutor didn't act according to the rule of law, and he kept the selectivity and politicization, we will bring people who represent situation cases from different parts of the world, with first-class scholars, with first-class academics, with first-class people who are in this field, and we will speak truth to power. We will say it up to him that we are not going to accept that. We will challenge that, but nobody should accept. We will accept the rule of jungle as he tries to do. I said it before, in old Rome, it used to be laws to protect masters, not slaves. We are not the slaves of the 21st century. We are not going to accept that. And we will never lose hope that one day we will bring justice and dignity for our victims. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you. That was excellent. I have 3 hands up, and we have about 10 minutes left. So let's take a question from, and then there's another question. So let's take 2 questions at a time. So Usha and then Hassan. So Usha.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh,
we may take, Diana, the 3 questions together, if you don't mind.
Because we have a 4th as well. Okay, so let's take all 3, and then I'll read the 4th question. Go for it. So Usha, please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So I'm a lawyer here in Malaysia. I know Hassan very well. We've collaborated in the past. Law for Palestine, and Malaysia is a firm supporter, of course, of the Palestinian cause. We also plan to be having a webinar very soon. I'm with Deputy Chair of the Human Rights Committee, the Malaysian Bar. Firstly, thank you so much for this excellent presentation. We also work with the Coalition of the International Criminal Court, and I can tell you there is huge criticism about the way this whole matter has been handled. Now, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court was set up for the purposes of 4 main crimes, which are genocide, crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity, war crimes, which means obviously that when an investigation has been started and instigated, the prosecutor, the International Criminal Court prosecutor, is duty bound to complete that investigation. I think that really has to be said, despite the fact that there are objections and so on, because then it goes into a political arena, which is not acceptable. And I can tell you, certainly Malaysia is not on that line at all. And if that actually happens, you can be very sure that the reputation of the court will be dragged through the mire. That's the first point. Secondly, there were suggestions today about referrals by friendly states to Palestine. I think that should be taken up. If 42 state parties to the ICC can give referrals on Ukraine, and the prosecutor immediately jumps up and acts, I don't see why the Palestinian cause, which is so very, very important, you can get friendly states to actually go for referrals on this matter to ensure that he acts, because we know that nothing has moved on the investigations instigated by Buttu bin Sadu, which is, I think, about quite some time ago, and nothing has moved. The focus right now, and I can tell you because we just finished the roundtables, questions were asked about Palestine, questions were asked about Philippines. I know they just started investigations into Philippines, but the whole issue of Palestine was just left hanging, and that is absolutely not acceptable. Questions on Palestine were raised by Al-Haq. So this is something that really has to be pushed, and I think the pushing has to come from the cause itself, from member states that are state parties who are friendly to the cause. I think there has to be that thing that has to be said. Now, in addition to the ICC, while the ICC is absolutely the correct jurisdiction for this matter to be filed, there are other avenues which we want to think about as well. The International Court of Justice came up with a very good decision, their advisory opinion some years back on the wall. You want to also think about perhaps filing a case, under international law. I give you an example. Myanmar filed, or Myanmar through a friendly state, the Gambia versus the Myanmar on the case of genocide. So the ICJ, which is International Court of Justice at The Hague, is also an avenue that you want to think about. That's one thing. And of course, the next thing that you want to think about, of course, is having a fact-finding tribunal, as they did again with Myanmar, because Myanmar, they hit all the three, the IIM, which is a fact-finding tribunal, which was in fact passed by way of resolution of the UN General Assembly. So there are many ways in which to swing this. The ICC is not the only joint in town, and if they're not going to move, we just have to show them that international law, international criminal law, has several avenues, and I think we should actually be looking at other areas in addition, of course, to pushing the ICC. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Usha. I'm going to ask Hassan also if he wants to share his question. Hassan, and then Mona. Hassan?
Thank you, Diana. I'll be speaking from another phone for a technical issue.
Yes.
Just a quick comment regarding the wording of de-prioritization that Giulia mentioned. When we were trying to, my name is Hassan bin Imran, by the way, I'm a board member at Law for Palestine. So we were discussing, we were trying to avoid the legal technicality of the meaning, de-prioritization. We were aware of that, but what we sensed is that there is a de facto de-prioritization of the situation in Palestine in the ICC. That's why we refer to the same term, but I agree with your point, Giulia. I mean, we agree with that. It's just we wanted to refer to the de facto situation that is happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hassan, and thank you for the clarification. Mona, if you wanted to pose your question.
Yes, thank you, Diana. I wanted to, first of all, say that I'm a proud member of Law for Palestine, and very happy to be with you today. It was such an inspiring lectures and out of the box thinking, and so much to work with, because like I'm a diplomat, I'm currently serving in Canada. So it's tricky to go forward with this situation in a country that initially and for years now has taken a side to be against anything that reaches the ICC on the Palestinian issue. And then now that we see with Ukraine, the tables have turned, and my understanding was that the situation concerning Palestine was mainly caused by the issue of statehood. So and the accession to the Rome Statute. Now, when we are talking about the case of Ukraine, the first thing that was talked about is how that did not apply as well. So I was wondering at that point, how do states have that right to decide for themselves what consists of a right for a any state, or even if they don't recognize that state themselves, if the ICC recognized jurisdiction, would they still be able to have that power of stating if that's right or wrong? And on another side, I wanted to assure everyone that the ICC issue is such a priority for our ministry and of course for the whole state. And as part of that, we try to learn as much as we can and to push on any avenues that we have tools for, along, of course, with the brilliance of all the human rights organizations, our beautiful civil society, and everyone else that is doing an amazing job to show the double standard and to push forward, so we would be able to take away all the propaganda and the smoke that is being pushed, the bias question, and to ask the international community for credibility, because it's not just about the ICC, it's now about every single other organ, because we've been going on the same issue and the same problem with the UN Security Council resolutions, with the UN Human Rights Committees, with every place that Palestine would want to reach out to have a legal stand. And these organizations were created especially so the weak would be able to have a say. So the credibility does not only touch on the ICC. When this happens, it would touch on everything else. Thank you so much. And I would welcome anything that you would help us with our narrative and our stand with any government that thinks the discussion moves out of the ICC and is in the capitals of the powerful countries and liberal democracies of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mana. Before we turn to that final question, there's one that was in the chat, and then I had my own very quick question to ask. So the question that was in the chat was, it says that last week during an official visit to the ICC at The Hague, the head of analysis and investigation at the Office of the Prosecutor said that the court had sent their investigators to Palestine. Is this news correct? And what is the number of investigators? And I believe that question was from Lviv.
Could you please repeat that again?
Certainly. Last week, during an official visit to the ICC at The Hague, the head of analysis and investigation at the Office of the Prosecutor said that the court had sent their investigators to Palestine territories, to Palestine. Is this news correct? And what is the number of those investigators?
We are the one who's supposed to know, and we have no clue about that. Okay. I can assure you 100% this is absolute fake and untrue.
Okay. And then my final question, which is,
we are following there hour by hour, not on daily basis.
I imagine you are. So my final question is a little bit outside of the box, which is that given that we've seen all of these obstacles for Palestine to be able to go to the ICC, and effectively this is about state versus state, is the ICC the right avenue for Palestinians? And I leave that open to anybody who wants to answer the question.
Diana, I'll be happy to.
I knew you would, John.
Before I do, I'd like to react to what Mona Abumara was saying about how to respond to these countries that are objecting to going ahead with Palestine. I think the Ukraine situation gives us a new avenue. Anthony Blinken's reason for objecting to the Palestine investigation is that Israel is not a party to the Rome Statute. Well, obviously Russia is not a party to the Rome Statute, and he can't work fast enough to get into that situation. So, in terms of how to get this going, I think, well, we're very lucky to have some brain power here. And I see Anis Kasim is on the call. Hello, Anis. I'm very happy to see you. And I'm on But I think there's another avenue, and that is this commission that was set up by the Human Rights Council last summer. I mean, that commission is tasked with putting together criminal dossiers on individual people who are responsible for committing crimes that relate to the situation in Gaza of 2021 or to the root causes of the situation in Gaza in 2021. So I would like to see that commission, putting together a list of officials from the Israeli government that they consider responsible. And I think in that regard, it would be very helpful to have people, especially from Gaza, communicating to the commission, which is headed by Navi Pillai, to communicate to the commission that they consider themselves to be victims, either with respect to what happened in 2021 or with respect to the fact that they are from families from 1948 who were denied repatriation. That committee has a website. It's posted where you can send in information. I could see a campaign where we encourage large numbers of people to send communications to that commission in the hopes that they will come up with something. And they did submit an interim report in, about 3 weeks ago, this new commission, and it's very encouraging. They take very seriously their task of looking into the root causes of what happened in Gaza in 2021. So I think this commission is very open to what might be sent, and that commission in turn can impact the International Criminal Court. So I'll stop.
Diana, if you allow me just to add to what John said.
Please.
Last week, the 20th and 21st of this month, a few days ago, we were having a meeting in Geneva, 14 of us, with this committee. And this is the second meeting, we are having with them. And we are coordinating in a very strategical way. And I think, this committee, of whom it consists Navi Pillai, first-class lawyer, academic, Milon Kothari, Chris, very renowned names and untouchable credibility and professionalism. They, as you said, submitted their first report. The second report will be in August, and they are going to address in October the General Assembly. And yes, they have very, very wide agenda and very wide mandate to work on, and that's inclusive. About everything, not limited even to occupied territories, but as well inside the Green Line, inside Israel as well. And this can go deep up to the deep causes of the conflict. I think you are right. We have to invest quite a lot. Besides, making very special focus in trying with all restrictions to reactivate universal jurisdiction cases in different parts of the world besides ICC. All options should be used.
Well, I want to thank all of you for your really excellent contributions. Before I close, I want to really thank the two interpreters, Malik and Noor, for taking the time. I know it's not always easy to do the interpretations, so thank you very much for making sure that this has been all-inclusive. And of course, I'd love to thank the hosts as well as all of the speakers. This has been truly enlightening. I could go on for another hour and a half to 2 hours, but we all have to get on with the things that we have to get on with. So on behalf of ARDD and on behalf of Law for Palestine, I want to thank everybody for joining today and for being part of this really excellent webinar. I hope to see you at the next webinar in very, very soon. So thank you again.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anis,
Bye.
Julia, John.
Thank you, Raji, Anis,
Tristino.
Giulia.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you all of us.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
participants. Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Hope to see you soon, all in Gaza.
Inshallah, inshallah, ya Rab, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Hopefully, inshallah.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay.